I think it's about time to try some new content on this channel. So, relax your head and prepare to listen to a few horror Reddit stories while you fall asleep. I never really told this story online because every time I think about it, I get the same uneasy feeling I had that night. This happened about 6 years ago when I was coming back home from a friend's house. It was late, somewhere around 1 a.m., and I decided to take a shortcut through a quiet road that passed near a large field. I had walked this route dozens of times before, so I wasn't worried about it. The night was unusually silent. There were no cars, no dogs barking, not even the sound of insects. About halfway down the road, I noticed something standing near the edge of the field. At first, I assumed it was just another person walking home, but as I got closer, I realized they weren't moving at all. They were just standing there, facing in my direction. Something about it felt wrong. I couldn't make out any details because it was dark, but I could tell the figure was unusually tall. I kept walking, trying not to stare. When I finally passed the spot where I had seen it, I glanced over. The figure was gone. I immediately stopped and looked around. There was nowhere it could have disappeared to in just a few seconds. The field was open for hundreds of feet, and there were no trees or buildings nearby. I remember feeling a chill run through my body, but I convinced myself that I was tired and imagining things. Then I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't loud, but they were clear enough to hear on the empty road. I turned around expecting to see someone, but there was nobody there. The footsteps stopped the moment I turned. I stood for a few seconds, listening. Nothing. As soon as I started walking in, the footsteps returned. This happened 3 times. Walk, footsteps, stop, silence. At this point, I was genuinely scared. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The road behind me was completely empty. I started walking faster, and the footsteps seemed to match my pace. I didn't look back again. I just kept moving. When my house finally came into view, I felt relieved. I hurried to the front gate, unlocked it, and stepped inside before closing the gate. I looked down the street one last time. Someone was standing there. The figure was at the far end of the road, completely still. Even from the distance, I could tell it was unusually tall. What I remember most clearly is that it seemed darker than the darkness around it, almost like a shadow that didn't belong there. I slammed the gate shut and rushed inside. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I convinced myself that fear had gotten the better of me. But later that day, my neighbor asked me a strange question. He said, "Were you outside late last night?" I told him, yes. He looked uncomfortable and said he'd been looking out the window and around 1 a.m. and had seen me walking down the road. Then he asked me, "Who was the person following you?" I felt my stomach drop. I never told him about the figure. In fact, I hadn't told anyone. To this day, I have no explanation for what happened. Maybe there was a real person on that road. Maybe my mind filled in details because I was alone and tired. But I know one thing for certain. I wasn't imagining the footsteps. And according to my neighbor, I wasn't walking home alone that night. Story 2. Back in the 1960s, my family was given an antique bedroom set that had belonged to my deceased uncle. It was old, but beautifully made. The kind of furniture that's built to last for generations. That was something about it that felt different. Almost like it carried a piece of the past with it. My younger brother and I shared the bedroom and slept in the same bed. One night, I woke up and saw a man standing in our room. I watched as he slowly walked out through the doorway. I was still half asleep and convinced myself it had only been a dream. I closed my eyes and went back to sleep. Later that night, I woke up again. This time, I saw the man return. I watched in disbelief as he moved toward the old mirror in the room. Then something happened that I still cannot explain to this day. The man climbed into the mirror and disappeared. I was terrified. I didn't know if I was awake or dreaming. I said nothing and stayed completely still, hoping it was over. The next night, I decided to stay awake. I needed to know if my mind was playing tricks on me. Then it happened again. The man appeared from the mirror. He slowly crawled out, stopped for a moment, and looked directly at us. He stood there silently watching us before turning around and walking out of the room. Frozen with fear, I woke up my brother. We stayed awake together, hiding under our blankets, watching and waiting. And sure enough, the man came back. We both saw him walk into the room and crawl through the mirror once again. That was the moment we completely broke down. We ran to our parents' room, crying, terrified, and told them what we had seen. Our father didn't believe us. He laughed it off and sent us back to bed, saying we must have had a bad dream. But we were too scared to sleep in that room again. So we grabbed our blankets and pillows and made our beds for ourselves in the hallway. When our parents saw how frightened we were, they eventually switched bedrooms with us. A few days later, we woke up to the sound of a massive crash. We ran to see what happened. Our father was standing there, pushing the old dresser and mirror down the back steps. Without saying a word, he went to the garage, came back with gasoline and an axe, and destroyed the entire bedroom set. Then he burned it. He never explained what he had seen. He never admitted anything. But we knew. Whatever it was, he had seen it too. Later, my mother asked to describe the man. We told him everything we remembered. She became quiet. When she told us that man we described looked exactly like my uncle, the very person who had owned the bedroom set before he died. To this day, I still don't know what I saw that night. Was it a dream? A memory? Something connected to the old mirror? I may never know. But this story will haunt me for the rest of my life. Because some things you only see once, but you never truly forget them. Me and my two other friends, Lily and Emma, were outside floor 1. It was completely normal. We all were having fun. We were laughing and having the time of our lives until it got late. We've got 2 elevators. One of them was broken, so we got to the one that was normal. At least we thought it was normal. We got inside. The elevator was tapped on 3 different floors. I tapped on 16, Lily on 21, Emma on 24. First, we got to floor 14. I said goodbye and walked out. When I got out, I saw the numbers all over the dorms. There wasn't my dorm hall numbers. I was at floor 7. I was confused, but I said, it's nothing, and I probably misclicked. I tapped the elevator button again. It came down. But when I got in, my friends were still inside. They looked terrified. I asked them what was wrong. They kept quiet until Lily talked. She said, ghosts are in here. The sentence chilled down my spine. I said, what do you mean? There literally aren't. I never believed in ghosts, so I didn't believe them either. Emma then said, when you walked out, we got into a floor that none of us tapped. We got into floor 19, and you came back inside. We knew it wasn't you because you're not good at running up the stairs. We were horrified. We knew you would come back, so at Lily's floor, she didn't get out. We stayed in the elevator. Your 2.0 self got out on Lily's floor, though. That was scary. As I heard it, I said, you know what? Let's just only click on one floor. They all agreed with me. We clicked on floor 10. We all got out. But when we got out, we were still in floor 7. My soul went cold, and I was scared as hell. I told them to just do the most basic one. Go down the stairs. Why haven't we thought of that first? We ran down the stairs. We had a little chat when we were running down the stairs. I asked, isn't it weird that we were talking in the elevator? It didn't move. They thought about it. And we went down. But as we did, the lights flickered. We stopped going down and waited a little till the light stopped flickering. But in the middle of the scene where it was flickering, something touched my hand. Another hand. It was different, though. It was cold. Very cold. I thought it was a dead person touching me. I was scared as hell. But that's not even the point. It stopped flickering, and I didn't talk about the hand. We went downstairs. We reached the floor. We thought we were all on floor 2. But turns out we were all at floor 7. This was not getting good. We tried the elevator once again. We tried to go to the highest floor, 35. We clicked on the floor. The light flickered again. We got scared. Every other second. But then it got pitch black. We didn't talk. Then it flickered again. I looked back at Emma. She was gone for a second, but her arm stayed. This was creepy. Lily looked at me because she saw that too, but we didn't talk about it. Emma was acting off, though. We got out on my floor, but they looked horrified as I looked at them. I tried to go to them and said, "I'm not bad, I promise." They told me to back off, and I asked why, but then they said that my doppelganger was behind me. That chilled down my spine. Story 4. What's the creepiest thing you've ever experienced from your rented apartment? In my case, when I was around 13 or 14 years old, I had a very vivid experience that has stayed with me ever since. One night, I dreamed that I woke up on the sofa bed on the first floor of our apartment. My sisters would always tell me not to sleep there, and I was certain that night I had gone to bed upstairs. I remember wondering why I had somehow ended up on the sofa. The sofa bed was positioned with 2 chairs facing it, and the staircase to the second floor was on the right side. When I looked toward the stairs, I saw an old woman sitting on the floor, the first 3 steps, looking at me. She kept kicking on the door. On the left side was the sink. I saw a pale, naked, bald boy around 4 to 6 years old, washing himself in the same sink where we usually wash dishes. I just really remember he is sitting in the sink, but I don't remember any expressions. I then went to the bathroom and saw a long-haired girl squatting in the corner. Everything felt completely real. Suddenly, I woke up at around 2 a.m. The dream felt so realistic that I immediately rushed to check the first floor. When I got there, I found the faucet running, the lights turned on, and the front door wide open. It was an apartment, and it's impossible for the door to be open all this time. We were not robbed at the time because there was no missing items. I quickly turned everything off and woke my sister up to ask if she had gone downstairs during the night. She said no. At that time, only one of my sisters were home, because 3 of my 4 sisters were working graveyard shifts. I never got to sleep that night. Years later, when I was 19, one of my sister's friends from work visited our apartment. She refused to go inside because she claimed she saw an old woman and a young boy in the middle of the staircase, staring at her, as if they were guarding it. Aside from that incident, I also experienced frequent knocking sounds and doors opening on their own from the second floor. Sometimes my closet would open by itself. I don't know if it was caused by the wind, although the wind nearby was relatively small. One experience in particular stood out to me. One of my sisters used to knock on my bedroom door whenever she came home so that I would wake up. One day, I heard a loud knock, and then my bedroom door slowly opened itself. I didn't think much of it because I assumed it was my sister playing around again, but she never called my name, which makes me wonder. However, when I got up and went downstairs, I discovered that I was completely alone in the apartment. I don't know. It felt weird living in the apartment as there was, particularly in the middle of the city, very convenient. 3 bedrooms and inside a subdivision. And we only paid roughly about 8,500 pesos considering how many perks it gives. But yeah, something felt off to me. In the apartment sometimes, even when I'm at one of my sister's bedroom, I can see a figure lurking around near her closet. She doesn't want to claim something was in there, but one time she brought a rosary and a salt lamp for no apparent reason and placed it where I usually feel a bit off. Story 5. I was paralyzed by something at my great-grandmother's grave. Back in November 2019, my sister came up from Texas to spend a few days with me. We were incredibly close at the time, and since it was the week of Thanksgiving, the mood was festive. My mom, my sister, and I went out for supper at a local Chinese restaurant. We were having a fantastic time, laughing, taking pictures, and joking around with the staff. After we finished eating, we decided to visit Park Hill Cemetery to pay our respects to the family members we have buried there. As I drove to the grounds, we were still in high spirits, happily catching up on lost time. It was around 4:30 in the afternoon, so it was still light outside. I parked right in the front of the plot where my great-aunt and great-grandmother are buried next to each other. We walked over to the graves and stood there together quietly, reminiscing about all the memories we shared with them. That was when I noticed a disturbance directly to the right side of my great-grandmother's grave. The plot next to it has been dug up recently. The earth was fresh, and the headstone had been completely removed, leaving a gaping, empty vulnerability in the ground. Suddenly, an overwhelming feeling of dread washed over me. My skin felt like it was literally crawling off my body, and a prickly sensation forced the hair on the back of my neck to stand up. Goosebumps broke out across my arms. I started sweating profusely. A sudden violent wave of dizziness hit me so hard that I thought I was going to pass out right there on the grass. Then out of nowhere, an ungodly, unhuman voice pierced the air. It sounded like a high-pitched, agonizing wail. I've never heard anything like that in my life. My sister whipped her head toward me, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" "Yes, I did," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What the hell was that?" She looked just as terrified as I felt. We both know that sound did not come from a human throat. To make it worse, the cemetery was entirely empty. There was no one else on the grounds besides the three of us. We looked around over at our mom, but she seemed completely tuned out, staring blankly ahead as if she was in a trance. She was softly talking to herself and clearly didn't hear the wail, nor did she acknowledge us when we asked her about it. Out of the blue, a sickening sensation overpowered my entire body. I became physically ill to my stomach. My vision blurred and I could barely see in the exact moment. It seemed as though a massive, oppressive black shadow stretched across the sky, completely blotting out the warmth of the sun. I felt a coldness penetrate to the very depths of my soul. "I gotta leave now," I choked out to my sister. "I can't stomach this." I turned to head back to the car, but I immediately had to fight for every inch. It felt like a heavy, invisible force had invaded my body, physically preventing me from leaving the cemetery grounds. Panic gripped me as I realized that this presence was holding me against my will. "I can't move my legs," I panicked, grabbing my sister. "I need your help." It took me over 5 agonizing minutes to drag myself back to the car, a distance that had usually taken us literally 15 seconds to walk on the way in. I could feel the oppressive energy radiating from the massive stone looming right next to our family plots. When I finally collapsed in the passenger seat, I had virtually no energy left. I was so physically and mentally exhausted that my sister had to take the wheel and drive us home. It wasn't until the cemetery gates faded into the distance that the crushing weight on my chest started to lift. The sickness didn't leave me, though. Later that night, I became violently ill and totally drained. Even though my house was warm, I was freezing to the bone. I put on my thickest pajamas, a heavy robe, 2 pairs of socks, and buried myself under a pile of blankets. But the shivering wouldn't stop. A blinding migraine took over and my stomach was turning too fiercely to allow me to eat. When I lay incapacitated, my sister called a local friend to recount what happened. That was when we learned the history of Park Hill. There's a notorious witch and warlock buried on those grounds, a husband and wife who died at the exact time. The corner of the cemetery where they were buried aligns directly with the direction that unhuman wail originated from. As for the empty grave next to my great-grandmother, my mom finally snapped out of her translator and explained it. Apparently, the family of the woman buried there had recently paid to have her body exhumed and moved to another state. It took me 3 full days to recover from the physical toll of this afternoon. But the nightmare didn't end there. For the next 6 months, I felt the exact same dark, heavy presence lingering at my house, specifically hovering near the pitch-black woods bordering my property. I've experienced spirits before, but nothing has ever rendered me entirely incapacitated like that day. I eventually went back to the cemetery the following summer, and the air was completely still. I didn't feel a single drop of that sinister force. It made me realize something terrifying. Whatever was waiting for me in that empty, freshly dug grave didn't just target me. It used the visit to attach itself to me, and it followed me all the way home. Story 5. What it means. This is a post revolving around me desperately wanting some interpretation or answer to what a dream/nightmare I had when I was 5 years old. For this to make the most sense and give people who kindly decide to read this some context to work with, I need to give you some background. I am 16 years old. Naturally, I'm a very logical person. That has made me a skeptic. I don't fully believe in things paranormal, but the only reason why I don't completely not believe in them is the house I lived in until I was 6 years old. I will explain some of the unexplainable things that occurred in the house, and I swear on my life that all I'm about to say is true. My grandfather died from a heart attack when I was in first grade, and it obviously took a toll on my sister and I. One night, my sister was upstairs waiting for both me and my father to come as well, because at this time, he would read us Harry Potter before bed. While she was waiting, a strange, uneasy feeling came over her. In my parents' bedroom, there was a long walk-in closet with a shoe rack at the very back. My sister's eyes wandered into the dark closet, and in it, she saw my grandfather. He was sitting on the rack, slightly transparent, white, and he looked as surprised that she could see him as she was. After what felt like 30 seconds, but what she said has felt like only 5, she ran downstairs and told our parents. Now, this may seem like something she made up, hallucinated, or dreamt, but something happened that one day that no one in my family can explain. My dad asked her what shirt he wore when she saw him. She said plaid. He died in a plaid shirt. There was no pictures, no mentions of this fact. My sister had absolutely no way of knowing that's what the shirt he died in. Strange as hell, I know. Once my mom was starting to read a book by Ed and Lawrence Warren, and it was a warning that reading the book may make you susceptible to the paranormal. My mom dismissed it. Not 5 minutes later, we all heard a loud bang in the hallway. We had a large glass chandelier, and it had multiple glass spheres on it. One had fallen. Here's the strange thing. We never, ever found it. It left a dent on the floor. We all heard it. It was missing from the chandelier. This thing was at least 4 inches by 4 inches. We were in that house 3 years after all. And even when we moved out, we still never found a trace. And I kid you not, the place it fell had nowhere for it to go or hide. She never kept reading that book. In the basement, we had a theater room. It was a rectangular box with no windows and dual symmetrical closets in the corners of the room, furthest from the double doors as its entrance. This room, for whatever reason, freaked everyone out severely. Not just us. Whenever someone stayed at the house, regardless of their beliefs, and without fail, if they ever stayed the night in the theater room, they would request to move the next morning. Everyone said it just felt off, and for lack of a better description, wrong. Once my sister was in there and shut the doors with the lights off, and then she said that she felt like she couldn't move. She just screamed for my dad until he came down and let her out. One last detail about this basement. Many times when my sister and I were down there playing, we would bolt upstairs at the exact millisecond. It didn't matter if we were in the same different parts of the basement, or even if we looked at each other or not. No words or indications given. There are more stories, but these give a good example of a truly unexplainable thing that happened in the house, and they will hopefully provide further insight into my early childhood nightmare that still haunts me to this day. Let me say that I do not get the chills easily, and when I do, it's either from cold weather or listening to a really good song. When I retold this dream for the first time in years to one of my good friends a few months back, I genuinely got intense full-body chills. Telling it to her, it made me feel uneasy. Thinking about this dream today, I got the same chills and extreme unease as it spurred into making me make this post. My current explanation is that it was a nightmare like any other that hit me in a specific developmental stage where it was ingrained in me. And it's still the most vivid dream I've ever had. But given that it's happened in the house, it feels as wrong as the rest of the stories I just told. Anyways, I apologize for taking so long to get to what this is really about. I was in the second story of my house, playing with a stuffed animal. No worries were in my mind, but decided I wanted to go see my mother. I walked through the doors of my parents' room, and where they should have been was something that made my skin crawl. There was a woman sitting completely straight in their bed, centered perfectly against the backboard, her legs under the covers and her hands calmly by her sides. Her head was already turned toward the doorway, like she was expecting me. Her head was stretched upward, maybe 2 to 3 feet, completely impossible and inhuman. Her head was distorted like something stretched badly in Photoshop. Her eyes were black. Her hair was light and possibly in a ponytail, but was too distorted to tell. The only thing I could describe her as akin to some of the many things you would recognize in an alternate from the Mandela catalog. Maybe the dream is why this series freaks me out. She said 2 words, and I heard them in a complete 360 as if they were spoken to me telepathically. "Hi, honey." My stomach dropped, and I ran out there as fast as I could. The dream continued normally, and I completely forgot about that thing in my parents' bed. Then I was with my mother. We were going upstairs. I still had no memory of what I had previously seen. I walked through the door, and the thing was smiling at us. Her head turned to the doorway again. My mother freaked out. I still remember her yelling, "What is that?" My whole vision started shaking, and there was an almost static-like white noise that filled my ears as I crouched down on the ground, hiding my head in my arms and tucking my legs underneath me. When I was 6, I went through a phase where I slept at the foot of my parents' bed in the sleeping bag because I was afraid to sleep alone in my room. This stopped after we moved out of the house. Big shocker. When I woke up from this dream, I was in the exact position I was in when it ended, in the exact place in the room I was when I was in the dream. I lifted my head to see the room was dark and that the dream wasn't real. For some reason, this dream had never left me and never will. I can't properly portray it without having you live it. It was just so wrong. Story 6. A haunted pub in Yorkshire. I was 14 years old when I started working at this pub in 2015. It's a beautiful pub, situated at the foot of the moors above our village in Weirfeldale, Yorkshire Dales. I used to get teased by the chefs about it being haunted. It was hundreds of years old, and the landlady at the time, being a bit whimsy, had even at one point brought it in a medium. There was one occasion where I was convinced that someone had walked behind me in the kitchen and gone down the cellar steps, but that experience doesn't even come close to what my dad experienced. Over the years, our family and friends frequented the pubs, meals, drinks, etc. My dad and his friends were regular drinkers there on most Sundays. Now I think about it, it's important to stress how credible my dad is as a witness. He was never the sort to believe in ghosts. He's a Yorkshire man, not religious, ex-army, did 20 years as a traffic cop. Basically, he doesn't have time for nonsense. So, when this man comes home and tells you he saw a ghost, you are completely lost for words. So, here's what happened. One Sunday, my dad and his friend were at the pub. The usual walk the dogs up and have a few pints after close when suddenly the dogs were mental. They were barking at glass doors in the bar, which led to the back of the pub. When my dad looked, he saw a figure. The figure he saw rushed across the corridor as that has come from the side of the door had gone upstairs. My dad first thought, being a police officer, was that somebody was trying to rob the place. Slip in unnoticed. My dad immediately went to search the back rooms. Upstairs, the cellars, nothing. The external doors were locked. There was nobody there. He returned utterly confused, and then the landlady said, "Oh, it'll be the ghost." The pub changed ownership a few years later. It was still a beautiful place, overlooking the Rosefoot Valley. My dad lives in America now, and stays there when he comes back. He's never experienced anything else since. Story 7. Hubby and I saw an old family friend's doppelganger. Yesterday, my husband and I went to a small event in our city that's much like a Ren fair, LOTR themed. We got dressed up and all that, walking around the area, checking out gift shops and having a blast. My husband saw his old high school buddy Luke's mom, Tabby, and pointed her out. As she noticed him and called out his name, we went over to talk to her, and Tabby was talking about Luke and his sister, his grandma, all of their relatives, as she mentioned that Uncle Bill had recently passed away. Typical small talk with family you haven't seen in months or years. There was another younger woman with her, who we didn't recognize with her. Tabby introduced them as her bonus daughter and granddaughter. This older woman hardly spoke a word to us, but when we left, she looked at me and said, "You're a blessing." We said goodbye to Tabby. She gave us hugs and kisses and gave my husband her number, which was almost exactly the same as hubby's grandmother's old number, except the last digits were different, and we parted ways. Cut today, my husband had messaged Luke and asked him about his mama, and Luke had no idea what he was talking about. My husband swears up and down that she looked exactly like his mother. We gave him a play-by-play of the whole interaction and brought up Uncle Bill, and Luke said that Uncle Bill had passed away over 15 years ago. My husband had messaged the number Tabby gave him at the festival and never got a response. He called the number and nothing. It just rang and rang. He messaged the real Tabby, and she swears that she was never in the city. She's still living in my husband's hometown and had no idea what he was talking about. Luke's grandmother had no clue either. We completely were stumped by this, and so was Luke and his mom. We had no idea how this Tabby immediately recognized my husband and knew all of this stuff about her family and my husband's family. Was she a doppelganger or something else? And what about this woman? Was she? Who or what did we really talk to? Story 8. My room is haunted and I am to blame. I know how ridiculous that title sounds, but hear me out. A few years ago, I started waking up with random bruises and scratches. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured I was bumping into things during the day and not noticing or scratching myself in my sleep. The other weird things that started happening. My lights would flicker for no obvious reason. I'd occasionally wake up to find my TV switched on, despite the fact that I barely used it. I watch everything on my laptop, so it's not like I would fall asleep in front of the TV. The strange part was that it was almost always on the cooking channel. Then there were my posters. For some reason, one of my Doctor Who posters kept ending up on the floor. Not the others, just that one. I'd put it back up, and a few days later, it'd be down again. The reason I think I'm to blame for it is all because I turned it into a joke. Whenever something weird would happen, I'd blame my imaginary ghost roommate, who I named Mr. Ghost Dude. One day after something strange happened, I jokingly said, "Yo, Mr. Ghost Dude, you can stay, but you've got to behave yourself." At this time, I thought it was funny. The bruises and scratches eventually stopped, which honestly made me feel better about the whole thing. But the other stuff never completely went away. Till this day, it feels less threatening and more annoying. If I ignored the weird things happening around me, the lights would sometimes start flickering. The odd thing is that it feels like the flickering follows me. If I leave one room and go into another, the lights will start flickering in that room too. Then, only the thing that seems to stop is acknowledging him directly. I never really had conversations with him. I've only ever talked at him. There's one exception. After my Doctor Who poster got torn down for what felt like the 100th time, I got frustrated and said, "What, do you not like Doctor Who?" The lights immediately flickered. I took that as a yes. I took the poster down and it never happened again. The weirdest part is that I recently told a friend about all this. They're really into paranormal stuff, and after hearing everything they told me and thought Mr. Go-To sounded like an aggressive entity, and that I made a mistake by naming him and essentially giving him permission to stay. According to them, acknowledging something like that can encourage it. Personally, I thought I was just making jokes. Now I'm wondering whether I've accidentally spent years encouraging a ghost, whether I created such a detailed running joke that my brain connects unrelated events, or whether Mr. Ghost Dude is genuinely out there with some strong opinions on Doctor Who and is worrying about a cooking show. I'm curious on what other people think. Story 9. My dad is still here. My dad passed away last September 14th. I was his sole caregiver for almost 10 years, so we grew close. I always took care of my mom both times as an unpaid caregiver. My dad was concerned about me after he passed and made sure I received everything, even though I have 4 siblings who are totally useless. The last 2 months that he was alive, I had already moved into the living room. I slept in my lazy boy to keep an eye on him at night. I had a baby monitor placed in the room so I could watch him after he went to bed, and I wasn't ready yet. One night the monitor came on, and there were all these orbs in the LR. They just disappeared. I know it's not insects because nothing was flying around. The second time the monitor came on, there was this mist above his head, and he was there, reaching out for it. It then just flew away. He had his rally the last Sunday before he died and was placed in the inpatient hospice facility. He died the next Sunday. I wish I had figured this stupid thing out better and had the film to show you. I have not really looked for any signs that he is still hanging around because I had so much to do since he died. But yesterday morning, something happened that convinced me he is watching over me. I have a tower fan in my bedroom, and yesterday morning, I was moving it closer to me when it almost tipped over. At the exact time, I heard my dad's voice say, "Uh-oh," which is something he liked to say when something happened. I'm the only one living in this apartment, and my windows were closed. Plus, I have an air purifier running so it blocks out any noise. But last night, I was sitting and thinking that it was my dad I heard. I thought maybe the fan said that when it fell over, but I failed to debunk it. My mom died in 2013. On the Wednesday before she died, she had a rally told me she was dying and going to hell. After she passed, I had two very vivid dreams of her. The first one, she asked me how I was. I told her that she was dead, and she said she thought so, but wasn't sure. The next dream, she tells me she's in heaven, but she misses me. Both times I woke up at 5:15 a.m. Haven't had any other experiences with her, but at least I know she finally found her peace. Story 10. Something crazy has happened in my house, I think. So, for the last few days, I have been watching paranormal, spooky, disturbing videos on YouTube. But for entertainment, they definitely freaked me out, but I didn't think anything of it. So yesterday, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and I started dozing off, and the feeling of somebody wrestling through my hair vigorously woke me up, however. I just thought it was a dream because I had started to fall asleep. Then a few hours later, I was in the bathroom with the robe on, and I felt something touching my hair on the back of my head. I thought it was a bug or something, so I took my robe off and started shaking it and ran my fingers through my hair to get whatever it was out. However, I will say at this point, I was also on heightened alert because I do believe in those type of things. Even though I've never experienced anything paranormal before, it did start to wake me out. The third thing that happened was a few hours after I was sitting on the edge of my bed. Again, I felt something grab the back of my shirt and twist and dig. I assume a finger in the side of my neck very hard. This I absolutely felt like happened, however. I was dozing off at the time again, so I don't know if it was very hard, and I feel like I actually felt it. I honestly thought somebody was in my house. I prepared to turn around and see somebody grabbing onto me. This absolutely freaked me out, and I was scared as hell. There was nothing I could do, however, I ended up managing to fall asleep without any incidents. When I woke up the next morning, I went downstairs, and every light was on in the downstairs when I know for a fact I turned them off the night before. I would never leave every single light on because I went to bed. It has been a day now since all this has happened, and the only thing I can say I've experienced since was possibly my eyes playing tricks on me and me seeing something in the dark just go by me quickly. Nothing like a life-size, but just very small things. I don't know. Am I crazy? Has anyone experienced anything like this before? Can't explain the noises from our cupboard. About a decade ago, I had the only experience in my life that I had not been able to rationally explain. This has for the last decade bugged me. I'm a professional operating in a world of risk and logic and laws and reason. This story sits outside of what I view my world as being. I told this story incidentally before, but I haven't ever written it down. I don't know why I've decided to do so now. I spoke about it recently with my family, and I guess it has been on my mind since. I am not sure whether it'll work, but I feel writing it down might at least get it onto paper and out of my head. This is a true story. I've changed the names, details, ages, and the like to hide my identity, but those I've told the stories will probably recognize it. First, some context. My family, mom, dad, younger brother, and I live or have lived at the time I moved in the southwest of Scotland. It's a beautiful country. We have a view of the Firth of the Clyde and the Isle of Arran in its mountains. On sunny days, whether summer or winter, it's really dazzling. But the rest of the time, which is most of the time, the weather is gray and moody. The sea is rough, the wind howls, and the geography takes on a melancholy view. It is beautiful, though. It's also a land bursting with history. Roman, Celtic, and Viking era artifacts. And ruins are pretty common. There are pretty historic hill fortress and other artifacts up on some of the more remote hills. We had, since I was a child, lived in the new built house. My parents were the first owners. Absolutely no history in it beyond our own. That was my childhood home, and to some extent, now when I dream about being back home, I have since moved abroad. This is the house that I would dream in. When I was a part away through university, having moved about 40 miles commutable, but I wanted freedom. My parents sold the house and bought a significantly older house in the much more historic part of town we lived in. Strictly speaking, it was in the neighboring town, but in this area there are 3 old towns which grew over the years to form a continuous semi-urban area. Anyways, that's not relevant. I also should have known that we were looking to move. They finally finished their garden, got it how they wanted. That's a telltale sign when we move. The house was maybe 150 years old, maybe even older. We don't know exactly how old. The first evidence of it being transferred was in the 1870s, and there are photographs that it appeared from the 1880s. But the construction suggests it was probably predated the pictures by 10-20 years. It was built on land that was portioned off from the estate of a Manor noble family. Distantly related to the Robert Burns wrote a poem about one of the daughters living in the house in the 18th century. It's not super famous, but it's fairly well known in our area. Evidently, by the second half of the 19th century, the Lord was facing financial troubles and portioned off much of his estate for housing, creating a Victorian housing estate around the remains of the garden. The street was on its way on a steep hill, as was at one time the high road from our town to Glasgow. At the bottom of our street stood a coaching inn from the late 17th century, and the old town cross where grisly things happened. The house itself was pretty beautiful. I won't deny it. A 2-story Victorian red sandstone villa, which had in later years been portioned into 2 homes straight down the middle. It had a more modern extension to the back, modern being the 1930s, housing the kitchen and another living room on the ground floor, and the bathroom and new master bedroom upstairs. The back door, which we used as the driveway, led to a garage in the back. Led into the kitchen. The new section was connected to the old one on both floors. The garden was walled in red brick and still had an outhouse, which would have at one point housed the toilets for the house. They were quickly repurposed into storage for the accumulated crap of the family of 4. We actually found an old spyglass in there when we were clearing it out. We put that in a cabinet downstairs. In the old section, there was a hallway front to back linking the front door of the modern extension. It housed a big old staircase and was paneled with various artwork. Very old-timey, and we kept it that way. The main entrance to the house had old wood double doors, which were seldom used. They led into the enclosed porch room, and then a big wood door with a stained glass panel, very pretty, ran into the hall. The hall also housed a washroom, and a sort of dead space between the washroom and door to the extension, which we used as a home office, running off the hall, all on one side, looking from front to the back, were 3 rooms. The front rooms was the parlor. It had a big bay window locked onto the 4th, an original fireplace, and a bone china chandelier, which was also original. It housed our best furniture and was off limits to my brother, my dad, and I unless we were invited. Mom was vigilant about that. And to her absolute credit, we are messy buggers. We wouldn't have wanted to sit there anyways. There was no TV in the room. The middle room was the dining room, which was kept relatively nice, but we were a sit-down dinner family, so it actually got used. It had a window looking out onto the shared driveway and the side wall of the neighbor's house. The back room was the lounge. It was the TV room. It had a different style of fireplace, Art Deco, so not original. The furniture was older and had seen better days. Upstairs, unless you went into the extension, there were 2 large and 1 small bedroom. My brother and I occupied the bigger ones, me at the back and at the front. The middle room kept for my gran when she visited. My bedroom window overlooked the back door that we would use to get in and out of the house. There were also a cupboard upstairs. It was a small room, perhaps a meter by a meter, with a heavy door on it. It housed towels and old clothes. A really key point to note is that it's beyond the door to access it. It had no external opening, not to the lot, no window, nothing. It was a dirty, musty room and air circulation wasn't great. We lived in the house for a year. Nothing really scary happened in that year. Sometimes the family dog, Berkeley, a big Dalmatian who looked terrifying but was such a gentle soul, would sometimes growl at something in the dark. But he was getting old, so that wasn't too unusual. Sometimes you could hear a rattling from the bone china chandelier in the parlor that was spooky sometimes, as we would all be downstairs, but our first thought wasn't ghosts. It was traffic from the street or just an old house settling. In the winter, at the end of our first year, I'd come back from university to visit. I was staying in my room. My mom was staying in the spare room, as her room was being remodeled by my dad. My dad worked offshore in oil, and he was not at home. My brother, for various reasons I won't get into, had been kicked out, so it's just my mom, me, and the old dog in there at the time. About 3 a.m, I was woken up by some very loud, very aggressive banging. It sounded like someone was trying to break down the back door. I'm startled, but I'm a capable guy. If someone is trying to break in, I'm not worried about whether I can stop them. So, I get out of bed and draw back the curtain. What I expect to see is my younger brother, who, as I said, had been kicked out, pounding on the door trying to get back in. But there was nobody there. By this time, I can hear my mom stirring. I throw on an old t-shirt and shorts and step out into the upper hall almost simultaneously with my mom. She asks if my brother is trying to get in. I tell her nobody's there. We're both puzzled and a little groggy, but it hits us both. The banging is not coming from the back door. It's coming from the cupboard. It is not the type of banging one can explain by saying it's the wind, or it is the house settling, or it's traffic passing by. Like I said, it's a one-way steep street. We won't get any traffic heavy enough to do that, and even if we did, not at 3 a.m. It's also not a windy night, and it really does sound like someone is pounding on the door. We can see it rattling as our eyes adjust. Now, my mom is a scientist. My brother and dad are more spiritual and believe in the otherworldly. My mom and I never did. But here we are, looking at each other in just pure bewilderment. What on earth is that? We actually laugh nervously. Neither of us can explain it. By now the dog has joined in, and he is not happy. He is growling and barking at the door as he puts himself between us and the door. I make a move forward, and he blocks my path. But now Mom and I are giggling, almost in delirium. We don't know what it is. We are both seeing and hearing it. I grab the dog gently to calm him. My mom asks what we should do. There's only one thing I can think of. Open the door. At this point, we think there must be someone in there. So, I tell Mom to open the door and get behind it. I go pick up one of my rugby boots from my room. It's got a big, nasty metal stud on it, and it's caked with mud, so it would hurt to be hit with. Mom opens it. I get ready, but there's nothing. The noise stops. Now Mom and I are looking at each other, not with fear, but with genuine confusion. What the fuck was that? We close the door again. It doesn't start rattling. But we hear a thud downstairs. Neither of us particularly wanted to go check it out, but the dog, God bless him, charges downstairs into the parlor and starts barking. All right, fine, Mom and I think. And we are both, comically slowly, making our way down. We get into the parlor, flick the big light on, nothing, except a spyglass on the floor, broken. It had rolled off a cabinet with no intervention. Now, it is a round, but the shelf it was on had a lip, and it has never rolled over, but it also did not land where it naturally would have if it rolled. The distance was more significant, and had veered off to the right of its position. Now, keep in mind, we are all downstairs, dog included. The bone china chandelier above us starts to sway, actually sway. Then it rattles. Neither of us know what to do now. We're laughing out of anxiety. We just began our day. Coffee in the kitchen. We didn't speak about it. I was debating hightailing it back to my flat at university. My mom said, word for word, "Don't you fucking dare leave me on my own here." It didn't happen again. We put the spyglass back outside. That door was kept open at all times. I personally didn't see or hear anything else in that house. My mom and dad would still report that the chandelier would sway and rattle with no explanation. My dad stopped going into the garden outhouse where the spyglass was. We only told him the story a good while later. He stopped independently. We would ask why. He's a formal naval man, so he said very little. He just said he didn't like it in there anymore. When we told him the story, he didn't even seem surprised. He just noted that he'd heard it too. We tried to get some more out of him, but he was resolute about it. He said you don't fuck with something you can't see. We left it at that. He did look a bit smug, though. I knew what he was thinking. Told you ghosts exist. I was right and you were wrong. We sold that house a few years later. Again, after doing up the garden, my parents still live in the town, but in a nice new house with no history. We sometimes talk about it, but none of us can even come close to explaining why or how it happened. I swear I was haunted as a child. I've, male 32, not really told many people about this, and whenever I have, I feel most people either think I was just a kid with an active imagination or think I was crazy. But I swear this all happened. I grew up in a little terrace house in England with my mom and 3 siblings. Most of my life in that house, there was something I can't explain, which used to terrorize me. Things seemed to start small and got worse over the years, spanning around 4 years. It started at nighttime, when I was about 8 years old. As I tried to sleep, the door would move a bit. I used to keep the door slightly open for a bit of light, and I'd hear a deep outward breathing, almost like a prolonged sigh kind of sound. It would move from the bedroom door until I could hear it pretty much standing right next to me. This happened for years. Not every day, but I'd say that most nights from when I can remember, I was terrified of it, and it was constantly waking up the house with my screaming. Whatever it was, it progressed at some point and started to say my name in exactly the same outward breath type again. Again, very familiar to a long sigh, just now saying my name within the sigh sound. I also started getting scratches all over my body. I remember other kids and PE teachers always questioning it when I was getting changed. At the time, I put down the heat, rashes, and scratches in the night, but now I'm not too sure that was the case. There was one really bad instance around 11 years old, when I feel I was briefly possessed by this thing. I just got a new PC game, Nonviolent, which only worked on our older computer setup in our dining room. Away from my family, who used to congregate in the living room, I started to play it, and about 20 minutes in, I hear my name called out in the same breath-like voice from right behind me. I quickly turn and briefly see a shadow seemingly sat down on the sofa. Within a second or two, it rushes at me, and everything goes black. When I wake up, I stood in the doorway to the living room, my hands covered, my eyes in tears streaming down my face. I move my hand, and my family are in front of me, concerned. I had asked what happened, and they told me. I ran into the room, covering my face, repeatedly screaming, "I've been shot." I have absolutely no memory of doing this, and as far as I know, it was like I had no control for like 1 minute. There were many weird things which happened during this time, but it all went away around 12 or 13 years old. I started sleeping with my head hanging out onto the windowsill, drowning out any noise from my bedroom with the sound of traffic. I feel it went away because it was no longer feeding off my energy, but I don't know. Since then, I never really had anything happen. No noises, seeing things, etc. Maybe sometimes I get a weird energy vibe, which makes my hair stand up when I walk into a room. But that is about it. Has anyone else experienced some similar experiences when they grew up? Did it carry on to your adulthood? Parts of me think that this might just be some weird stuff going on with my brain as a child. But I swear, my memories of it are all so clear. Thank you for reading. Alright everyone, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you want any more content like this, please do let me know. So, I hope you all sleep well, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you.